This is the Town of Mamaroneck Sustainability Collaborative. This is our June 2021 meeting. I'd like to welcome everyone tonight. But at first, before we get on to anything else, there are just two brief things I was hoping to do. The first one is I think we should all give a shout out and a round of applause to Sue Odierna, who has proved to be an amazing weather person. For practically 24 hours in advance, she foretold the downpour of biblical proportions that greeted me as I stepped off the train earlier today. And had Susie, my wife, not been available to pick me up, I was going to be looking for Noah and the Ark. The other thing I'd like to do is welcome a guest today, Janice Kaplan, who is from Harrison. Janice is going to tell us about just a little bit about herself in a minute. And we were introduced to Janice by Mark Carell. Wave, Mark, there you are. Both Ellen Silver and I were introduced just this afternoon. And so we invited Janice to our meeting so that she could see what it was we did. So Janice, could you just give us a minute or two on your background and what the scoop is in Harrison these days?
Yeah, sure. I've lived in Harrison for 24 years and my kids are, my last one is graduating from high school, and I got involved with the sustainability committee through Nancy Barr. And it was really started just a few years ago and nothing really was getting done. The only thing that we did get done was the plastic bag ban. And then COVID hit. And before that, actually, we were really working to try and get the food scrap program started. And we have hit roadblock after roadblock. And finally, just today, the DPW and the mayor emailed me telling me that they are going to move forward, but I mean, there's a lot that has to happen. So they're keeping me posted and we have to find a location, but hopefully we're going to get that through.
Right. So there are people who are here tonight who can give you a lot more background than I did this afternoon on the food scraps program. Like you, we actually also have worked with the Village of Scarsdale in getting our program up and running. And that includes not only the town, but the Village of Mamaroneck and the Village of Larchmont. So we found them very good helpers at the outset. But then again, I think what we should do is I've got your email. I'll pass it along to Sue and we'll put you in contact with a couple of the other collaborators and they can tell you a little bit more about the county program and some of the steps that we went through in order to get our program up and running, and then their perspective on key things that might be good for you all to start doing to assist Harrison in making the best choices and getting things moving as smoothly as possible.
Yeah, the email was that they sent me was, you know, they pretty much are, you know, Ron and Michelle came to speak at one of our board meetings before COVID and really laid out the program for them. And by the email that they sent me, they really seem to understand it seems like they understand what needs to happen. Whether I told them we are more than willing to help them with every single step of the way with education, community outreach, anything. So hopefully they'll reach out to us and let us help them.
Okay, great. Great. All right. So our first order of
Oh, wait, sorry. Did you want me to talk about the styrofoam thing?
Oh, sure.
All right, I'll just, so one of the restaurants actually reached out to us because they are very involved and they do their own food scrapping. And just after speaking to her, she told me that they use styrofoam for their takeout containers. And I don't know if they weren't aware that styrofoam is banned in New York State for use in restaurants. And starting January 1st, 2022, it's banned for sale in the state of New York. But Westchester County has already banned the sale of styrofoam in the county. So according to her, Restaurant Depot, Sam's Club, and Costco are all selling styrofoam takeout containers.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah. I spoke to the Department of Health. The Department of Health, they're the ones who are supposed to enforce the restaurant use. And they told me, if the inspector sees it, they'll do something about it. And as far as selling it, that is the Department of Consumer Protection, I think, in Westchester.
So are you familiar or acquainted with George Latimer, our county executive?
Mm-hmm.
So I think you should probably call his office is one idea, and have him he'll probably direct you to the person at the DEP, but I think they should know about it and probably follow up with an email as well. And if you can include the specific store names and even general locations, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. Is he easy to reach? Is it, wasn't sure. I haven't reached out to him yet.
By the way, Mitch, I also suggested Catherine Parker, who's, I believe, the chair of the Environmental Committee, who's a county legislator, and she's, I think she would, very much take the bull by the horns too. So that's another suggestion.
That's also a great idea because she will help with the county government as well, for sure.
Yeah.
Peter McCart is George's. Once I tried to call George and they put me right through to Peter McCart and he took my call right away. So for everything that's environmental, George's office may have you talk to Peter, and he's great too.
Right. Well, he is very good.
Okay, great.
Forgot about him. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so keep us up to date on that and your progress.
Sure.
Folks, have we seen styrofoam for sale in any of our stores recently?
I think one of the Chinese restaurants next to Coriander may sometimes use in the $2 chicken.
Okay, so that's Sue, you'll probably have to remind me, we should alert our collaborators at the Village of Larchmont about that, because that's obviously also, they're in violation. Okay, all right. Janice, thank you. Stick with us. We'll try to keep you at least entertained. So why don't we go on to the meeting minutes? I heard that some people actually read the meeting minutes. Frank?
Yes.
And yes. And yes, Michelle, what's up? Oh, okay. So anything we should be doing about the meeting minutes?
I move to approve them.
Is there a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? No, all right, those passed. That's great. So good. Good evening, Mark Kramer, Eliza Pertz, George, nice to see you. So a couple of event summaries that we wanted to get out of the way before some of our main agenda items. So June, I think you were going to share with us some things that you've been involved in the last few weeks.
Just to let everybody know that our Healthy Yards webinar with Dr. Evans from Mount Sinai's Department of Environmental Medicine and Public Health went quite well in terms of views. We had over 100 registrants. I think we had 110 registrants, and while we had just a small portion of those on live that night, within 2 weeks, we reached that number, maybe exceeded it now, in terms of the number of views of the webinar on the Larchmont Library's YouTube channel. So it also was, the session was also referred to in a vibrant discussion about pesticides next door. The communications director for Mount Sinai's Children's Environmental Health Center was delighted with the turnout, and they do a lot of public outreach. So, so I think we did well in terms of raising that issue. If anybody hasn't seen it, it is still available. I think we'll see if we can, Sue, I'll do a summary. I took some notes. I'll do a summary for anybody who hasn't seen it. Maybe we can put the link on our Healthy Yards webpage.
Good idea.
What was the reception from next door?
It was mostly people saying that they didn't want to see pesticides being used by their neighbors. I mean, there was, I can't remember anybody debating the validity of it. And there was some compliments about how Sarah Evans was very clear and direct, easy to understand. She answered virtually every question.
It was great.
Yeah, that's, you were there. Thank you for that. I saw you there.
It was great.
Anybody
So
has
is
questions?
I have a question. Do you know if you're allowed to spray pesticides on your front lawn right up to the curb?
Actually, that's not your lawn then. If you've got a sidewalk, the thing between your sidewalk and the curb is not your property.
Without a sidewalk?
Probably in almost every case, there is an imaginary line that runs through your grass that is the boundary between, in your case, Harrison's property as the street and anyone's personal property.
Well,
10 feet,
you're talking about the easement?
right.
Yeah.
It was my understanding that we all care for our own easement. You know, we care for our property up till, you know, through, and that's part of the, in my deed, I see that there. I mean, it's part of our responsibility, although the town has the right to do whatever it needs to do for the public good in that space. Well, you know, I don't know.
Well, I'm just concerned, like, you know, I don't use pesticides on my lawn and I have a dog and I'm walking my dog all the time, and I'm just wondering if people are putting the pesticides right up to the curb where the dogs are walking. If that's allowed or not.
Probably.
And that's allowed?
Yes.
Hmm.
There's no regulation that says it's not allowed.
Unless it's not really the homeowner's property, is that owned by the town?
I believe it's the homeowner's property, but the town has the right and authority to come into that space when they need to.
Okay.
It's a good question. It's something that's worth finding out, whether the town, which I don't believe sprays pesticides, that they're hired by owners. It wouldn't be the town that's spraying that area. It would be whether the owners are including that with the rest of their lawn.
And this is Harrison, you know, I don't know what the legislation is for Harrison, but generally it is it's private initiatives.
Right. So could we ask the Healthy Yards group to look into this a little bit? And if there's no regulation now, it doesn't mean that we couldn't suggest one. And if it's on public property and the town is already in the business of not putting pesticides on public lands, then maybe the town could choose to enforce that.
Do you
So,
think the town would take a stance of eliminating pesticide sprays through the community?
My town or any town?
I'm talking our town.
Okay,
We'll
right.
move to Harrison in a minute, but if you would do
Harrison's a no.
if you would do it, it would help us a lot. So do you think, Mitch, that the town would entertain removing pesticides from applications in the town?
I don't know, frankly, but I think this is a good year to raise these issues with the board. Next year might be different.
I don't think they can. They don't regulate that. That is state. That's part of the big problem, that we can't make a law regarding that. Well, we wouldn't need our Healthy Yards project. We would just ban it or work on that. But no, you can't, because that's
right. You're right.
That's the state.
You're right.
Or there is a bill in the state legislature, and I'm hoping maybe we can speak to our state senator and assembly person to either. Well, I think it's not in the Senate. I think it's in the Assembly. If we can either for them to co-sponsor a bill or back the bill or also introduce one into the Senate.
We should be able to do that, because the DEC issues all kinds of information about pesticides, right? And not using pesticides. So
the DEC specifically publicly says that they don't see any good reason to use pesticides for cosmetic reasons. We have that stated in our brochure. It's on our website.
Right. So, but there is no law that says you can't do it. So maybe the DEC could help to put in place legislation that says we can't do it.
Well, there's also the other option is versus making pesticides illegal, which may or may not be possible right now, or maybe it would take so long, which is there's alternative pesticides that are not as dangerous for the environment. They still do kill mosquitoes and early embryos of ticks, and they do prevent certain pestilence, but they're not dangerous for birds. They're not dangerous for the environment, and they're cedar oil, naturally occurring essential oils, which do suffocate, and they're not great, but they're 100% better. So there's also alternatives, which not a lot of people don't even know about. I mean, Lawn Doctor of Connecticut exclusively uses it. That's the Lawn Doctor. They're like a really well-known, very commercial organization. They only use essential oils in Westchester, in Connecticut.
That's a whole other discussion that I think we can have some other time, but yeah, because I know you want to stay on your
agenda.
Right.
So keep going. I think you have you have something else you want to share, June?
Arlene, we can announce that our Healthy Yards, Healthy Bees video premieres this week on
Thursday
TV, day after tomorrow, 8 p.m. Sue was kind enough to get our press release out. This was Arlene's brainchild, and and we storyboarded it.
Taken long enough.
Taken a long time. We storyboarded it, scripted it, worked with two terrific students who are videographers and edited the production, and they were wonderful. And the students, the B team, faculty is really excited about this look at the Mamaroneck High School B team and their learnings about bees and how we can create a better world and a better community to help them. It's a nice 10-minute piece. They'll air at 8 o'clock on Thursday. You could see it on LMC TV on their website. and as well as on Verizon and Optimum. And it's a wonderful celebration, I think, of we really have such terrific students and really terrific faculty in our school district. And they give voice in a wonderful way to why pesticides aren't helping our community or our bees. So that's terrific.
And June, I know it'll also be available on LMC's YouTube channel.
Yes.
So after it airs, then, you know, you can.
It's gonna run through the weekend. It's gonna
Yeah.
run there. It's gonna premiere on Thursday at 8. It's gonna run Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then it'll be available on their and LMC Media will make it available on their YouTube channel, so everybody can see it. As soon when it airs, we'll send out a link to everybody as well.
Great. That's terrific. All right. Let's see. Arlene, was there something else that you wanted to share in terms of events?
No, it was about the video, the bee video.
Okay, perfect. All right. Great. All right. Well, thank you. So the first main topic on our agenda comes from Beth Radow.
Mitch, did you want me to?
Oh, I'm sorry, Libby.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'll do
Please.
it real quick. So I just, Mitch wanted me to mention this wonderful, wonderful How Green event that took place last Sunday. I'm just showing you their wonderful flyer. We had 3 very wonderful women who are in Westchester County working on all of these pollinator and anti-pesticide and other important things. Jessica Schuler, who's the program coordinator of natural resources for the County Department of Parks, and she's at Lansdowne Park. And she spoke about ecosystems. We had Kim Eierman, who's a very dynamic native plant person who is selling her new book, The Pollinator Victory Garden, that has absolutely wonderful photos. And Philippine DeHaan, who actually is the founder of the healthyyards.org group that is out of Bedford 2030, and that among many, many, many other things that they do, they federate all the pollinator pathway groups in Westchester, and they do a wonderful job. This was a live event at St. John's Church. This is How Green, Houses of Worship Green in Larchmont, and we welcome people from houses of worship of any faith in any neighboring community. But I think Mitch is also planning to see how they can work together with the clubs to bring more and more very relevant programming, because the houses of worship have been doing some wonderful stuff. And this event was on Zoom as well as at St. John's Church. And so it will be viewable. I highly recommend watching it. Lisa McDonald will share with us when it becomes available, the link for that. And then I wanted to say that, as some of you know, because your gardens are on the tour, we have our Westchester Larchmont Mamaroneck Pollinator Garden Tour on Sunday morning. I don't know if you can see that. Nice bee. This is Philippine is a very talented graphic artist. So she has created these posters that are going to mark all of the gardens and parks and yards on the tour, and Kevin Crow has been delivering them to happy customers, and we will continue to do that this week. And basically, we want everybody to come. It's going to be wonderful. We have 13 or 14 properties and a special map. When you go onto the website that I will put in the chat when I'm finished, healthyyards.org/tour. It shows you all of Westchester County, but Philippine, because we managed to get so many wonderful yards and parks, Otter Creek, and I talked Jay Archer into opening his yard. He didn't want to do it because he has too many clients, but gonna do it. So his property in Rye is absolutely fantastic if you haven't been there. And so we are still looking for a few volunteers to help the front office while the property owner may be showing people around the backyard. So if you have college students or high school students who might be willing to do this 10 to 1 on Sunday morning, or even half of that time, you can, I'll put my email in the chat, but we certainly hope that everybody will be going around. We want to show how our neighbors are already not using pesticides, right? A lot of them have healthy yard signs, and we're encouraging them to take the pledge, and we want everybody to see how beautiful these yards are without pesticides and with many, many native plants and other pollinator friendly flowers and shrubs and trees.
So Libby, one question.
Sure.
With almost everything we do, we want to get something, stored somewhere on the internet as a visual record of what's going on, and understanding that photography or video of gardens is a very difficult challenge. Has there been any thought about any of that?
Thank you for pointing that out, Mitch. When we go on the tour, a Philippine asked me on Sunday, could we please take pictures? And if you get some pictures that are successful, she will be interested in using them for her documents and publications. She will share with me. And if you share them with me, I will share them with her. And then we can use them for our, Sue's emails and whatever we want to do for the town. So we highly encourage people to take pictures. We're going to be giving out the brand new Healthy Yards 8-page brochure and also some wildflower seeds on this tour.
Okay, thank you. Great. All right. So Beth.
Can you all hear me? I'm combining a phone with a picture. So that's me. You can hear me on the phone?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to bring to folks' attention, you may already be aware of this, but there's something called the Climate Mobilization that began after the Climate March in 2014 by concerned citizens who didn't believe that local government and state and federal government was taking climate change seriously enough. And since then, internationally and in the United States, there have been different municipalities, state governments, and countries who have declared a climate emergency. And their goal is to compel governments at the local level to adopt an emergency response to climate change. And entering emergency mode should have the effect of, launching a comprehensive mobilization for the environment. And the expectation is that when local elected leaders will advocate for climate emergency, then we can potentially enlist residents in a way that, wake people up in a way that they haven't been previously, and also potentially get access to funding under emergency funding availability for potentially infrastructure and other items that might impact us as a waterfront community. Since its inception, as of April 2021, more than 1,920 government jurisdictions and at least 38 countries have adopted a climate emergency declaration. The entire EU, New York City in 2019, and New Rochelle on May 18th. And I sent over to Mitch, and I can share with all of you the resolution that New Rochelle just passed. So why would this matter? Why would we want to do it? New York State in 2019, under the leadership of Cuomo, passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which is requiring by 2050 100% climate neutrality. And there are incremental benchmarks, and that includes electricity and fuel, development of clean energy, compliance with county, and potentially accessing, as I mentioned, emergency funding. It seems to me on the collaborative, we're already doing a lot of work, the work that Frank is doing, and Mark, and really, frankly, everybody in different ways. Julie mentioned a minute ago about herbicide. I don't know whether that has a direct link to climate change, but maybe indirectly. It seems to me that obviously this would have to be something we would all be interested in pushing our town council to take a look at. And if they were to declare a climate emergency, we could be entering the company of other jurisdictions, as I mentioned, New York City, New Rochelle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, the state of Hawaii. Hawaii has declared that. And it would cause our elected representatives locally really to require them to look at everything that we are doing through the lens of what are the impacts of weather, what is our local security, what is the impact on property value. It would require intermunicipal and interdepartmental coordination. For example, in New Rochelle, they have an advisory committee that's going to be working with a sustainability manager. It occurred to me that maybe the sustainability collaborative could function in that way. In any event, I just wanted to bring it to folks' attention, and I can circulate something including New Rochelle's resolution so you can read it, and then we can talk about whether or not you think it's something worthwhile to pursue.
Beth?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Eliza.
Were you able to go in front of the board or bring it to the Mamaroneck board?
No, I haven't brought it to them. I wanted to bring it to you all first.
Okay.
I am presenting it. I chair a committee for the League of Women Voters of New York State.
Okay.
And there have been 7 State League of Women Voters that have passed this, adopted this resolution, and we're going to have our convention this weekend, and we're hopefully going to adopt it. This works alongside of what's happening at the federal level. With there was a legislation that was proposed by Schumer, I think OAC and others, a congressional resolution asking President Biden to have the Congress declare climate emergency. I mean, this is sort of a buzzword right now, but it would also assist us state and locally. The county has certain storm regulations. I don't know if they're regulations or local law, but the idea is that it would help us. I think it would up the ante, if you will. And in my point of view, it would properly characterize climate change as the emergency that it is. And to the extent that it would enable us to access funding that is available under an emergency umbrella, so much the better. And then also it would hopefully be able to capture the attention of residents in the community. But again, I wouldn't present this, single-handedly. I think we have a track record as a collaborative with the town council, and this is not, frankly, something I alone could do. I mean, I think that in order for this to make any sense in our community, by the way, one of the focuses of this is also equity in a community. Now, if you look at the town of Mamaroneck, this is pretty much a middle-class community. If this were going to be the town and the villages, what, for example, they're concerned about in New Rochelle is making sure that when they're looking at where there are, putting certain, whether it's commercial enterprises or what have you, that it doesn't have an adverse impact on low income. So there were different considerations that may make sense in bigger cities than in Mamaroneck. But in any event, I think, from my point of view, we are doing a lot of this work. And if people believe that adding this to the conversation might be able to galvanize attention and support, we might be able to get some things done more quickly because it will already have been adopted into the framework of how the town council is proceeding.
So Beth, one
great.
question would be, why would anybody not want to do this?
Does it interfere with big business?
Well, we're not, we are not, if we're looking locally, I don't know, but of course, people will consider in some respects that this is a partisan issue. And then of course we say, well, climate change knows no bounds. And at this point, I think we all know that human beings contribute. The other thing is we're even beyond that conversation. Why wouldn't we? We have laws that need to be enforced right now. I mean, it was just brought up, about the county health laws and all the rest of it. Styrofoam, if you bring it to their attention, we have we have thinly staffed people in government, and it pretty much follows that unless you ask somebody to enforce a law, depending upon what the law is, it may go under the radar because they're busy doing other things. But, I think one of the big problems about lack of enforcement is lack of communications interdepartmentally and within a community. By the way, I put a note to George Latimer this morning. I was writing to invite him for a tree dedication up at Manhattanville, and I let him know that I'm going to reach out to Catherine Parker about this at the county level. I mean, just to put a bee in his bonnet and her bonnet, I know we're trying to support the bees, And so passing this would be the bee's knees. We're going to do whatever we can. This makes sense. And it doesn't have to be dramatic, and I know that calling something an emergency freaks some people out because people don't want to be freaked out. Why wouldn't people want to do it? Because we're exhausted from COVID. But if nothing else, COVID has underscored the fact that we have an emergency. And a lot of this is really the messaging and how we communicate things to people. But from my point of view, if there's access to money that can help us, that will be a very convincing way to get people on board, if for no other reason.
One of the things, Nick, go ahead. You were going to say something.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. But I mean, so absolutely, I'm hearing obviously that we're going to be tasked, to be doing a lot more climate mitigation efforts in this case. That's kind of one of the things I think you were listing off would be in that category. But I would hope too that, as part of this, there should be some form of, trying to do something about climate adaptation, right? It's because you have to prepare yourself basically for what could be the onslaught still of the climate emergency, which is basically, the weather effects, the flooding effects, any of those other issues in this case that can harm and damage properties and basically puts,
viruses,
a tremendous amount of, and any of those things, and all this other economic loss, because I'm leading to basically saying you can transcend political lines and to get through that in this case by talking about one word, jobs. Talk about jobs as well, because you're going to get jobs created by people doing climate mitigation type work. You're going to get jobs with people trying to adapt buildings, making them hardened and more resilient, potentially against other flood loss or any kind of other major disasters that could occur that could wipe them out. And then you're then going to protect then the businesses then so they can stay open and that they're going to be able still to produce, and you're not going to shut down those businesses and people are going to be out of the job potentially locally here in our own community. So, because I live in the village of Mamaroneck where we had a major flood here in 2007. It basically wiped out quite a few businesses along Mamaroneck Avenue and then up to the community where I live presently. So the bottom line is that there's a major climate issue in this case, and that we are still going to be affected by the detriment of climate change continuing to proceed forward. But we have to then also do something about the adaptation side of things as well, because or else we're just going to be sitting vulnerable in this case while we continue to try to feel like we're going to mitigate it. So I feel like there's also got to be that key component of adaptation added to this as well, if we are to really take this seriously.
Oh, there's no question that would be involved, would be included under the umbrella. This really is, as wide as the umbrella needs to be. I think what might be helpful, I will circulate the New Rochelle resolution so people can read it. It'll give you something concrete to take a look at. And then, and then we can all contribute, what we want to. And by the way, in 2007, I had planned for a year a tree forum at the Emmeline Theater, and I was expecting hundreds of people to show up. I had saplings to give out to people. We were talking about the impact of trees, adaptation, et cetera. And that's when that storm hit. And people were rowing their boats down, the street. So we as a community definitely understand how fragile we are as a waterfront community. People want to protect their property values. We need to protect and adapt. There's no question about it. And this really is, from my point of view, getting our local elected officials to see everything that they're doing, all the decisions that they are making on our behalf in the context of how extreme weather is going to impact us, et cetera. And I'm sure that everybody here has something to add to it. And I think we've got a track record, but I do think as a group, if we would need to be presenting this as a group to the town council. And I think the sooner the better that we people like the idea, we work together, we present it, and hopefully we get a resolution that doesn't have to be as complicated as the one in New Rochelle, I might add. The resolution that we're passing at the League of Women Voters is literally one paragraph. It doesn't have to be just one paragraph, but I think it doesn't have to be an encyclopedia either. You'll see that they have a very comprehensive resolution, and they're a city and we're a town. There are differences, but I really do welcome people taking a look at it and seeing what you think, and hopefully, we would agree that maybe we could move ahead and give it a shot.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You basically create a broad strokes in a resolution. You don't basically define everything within basically a resolution at the end of the day. And then after that, if the plan, then the town comes up with a plan to carry out and make sure that the vision and certainly the intent of the resolution that was passed is going to be carried forward and that it's going to be implemented. Then a plan will basically then be able to probably spell everything out after that. But yeah, I think there should be some broad strokes though, of just some specific things that we really want to make sure that, you would want to go and make sure that we're trying to do and achieve through an emergency declaration. Then basically you do all the kind of specifics thereafter.
Well, the other point is that there is an advisory committee, so that it's not as if only we come up with a resolution and hand it to the town and then we're done. We function, I believe, already as an advisory committee, but having an emergency declaration, climate emergency declaration adopted by the town council, using the collaborative as an advisory body would give us ongoing input, if you will, recommendations, et cetera, and potentially the town administrator would be, acting in an administrative capacity to be implementing, recommendations, et cetera.
Beth, what is the name of the group? Is it
the group is called, well, there are two groups, Michelle. The domestic one is called Climate Mobilization. And then there's also the international one is Climate Emergency Declaration.org. But the U.S. is Climate Mobilization. And happily, I am one person removed from the people who started this group. So,
so
if we got
different than the Climate Action Plan. There's a group called the Climate Action.
It's not the same group, but that doesn't. But that doesn't mean they're not connected. I think all of these people, Michelle, are they're all connected. But the these people are mobilizing as a grassroots, getting people to sign resolutions, getting them to get local government involved. The thing that's exciting to me is we've got this Cuomo legislation about trying to reach 100% climate neutrality by 2050. So you've got Frank and you've got Mark and you've got folks on our collaborative that have been working fiercely on this for years. And, the question is there money out there that we could tap into? And then also it's a way, I think this is a lot about educating people, using the language and the messaging, but to get people, because we wonder, how do we get people beyond our collaborative to be taking note of all of this?
Of course.
So, right, so it's connecting the dots also. But what's really, when you go online and take a look, and I can give some of the links, there are a lot of people around the world who have signed on to this. And some people question, well, is this just a feel-good, fuzzy thing? I think any of these things, it is what you make of it. But the more people that get involved, there are over 1 billion people around the world at this point. I think 12% of the world population is represented, if you will, by these climate declarations. And so, it is a movement. And I think if you think of a Venn diagram, you've got, different interlocking organizations. But ultimately, we're all talking about policy. People are talking about, I care about whether it's pesticides or styrofoam or all the rest of it. And you want to make sure that if the laws are on the books, somebody is, going to access the money to make sure that they can pay to have the law enforced. That's one of the things. Anyway, I don't want to take up too much time because I know that a lot of other people want to speak, but I thank you very much for the time.
Great. Thank you.
So I think one of the things we should all do, we'll get the information from Beth, we'll pass it around. We'd like to bring this up again in our July meeting. And I think one of the things everybody should think about between now and then is think about your neighbors. How are we going to help our neighbors understand that passing this regulation or the declaration is a good thing to do? And maybe it's property protection and maybe it's other things. But I think to the extent that we can take what is a worldwide movement and bring it down into the friendly confines of 10538 and make it relevant to people in Howell Park or in the Gardens or in the Murray area or wherever. I think that's going to be important, and it's going to be important to help this make sense to our elected officials because they're the ones.
You know what occurs to me, Mitch, what occurs to me? You're working on, for example, the tree code. Arlene and Michelle and others are working on a tree code. If you think about what this does with the tree code and the lamenting of knocking down all of those trees in Howell Park, if we had a climate emergency declaration, to my mind, it would really give a boost to the concept of a tree code. You'd have to think about if you're going to knock a tree down, if you're going to take one down, you need to plant another one. Thinking about what we're doing and how that's impacting a warming climate. It would require anybody who's thinking about doing these things to be looking at whatever the code is through that lens. And that's a good example.
We talked about this at the LEC meeting this week, and I couldn't more strongly believe that it starts with our teenagers. It's the children are on board. This is their planet. And we have time, but they've got a long time and it's going to be tough. And so the kids are much more focused on this and they have much more urgency and they have power to influence their parents. And it starts in the schools. And Joe has been really amazing and very involved. And I think this is something to bring to the schools and the science teachers. And, Larchmont, LEC, I'm going to be working with some interns in the high school. And my son's doing an internship there about the tree code. He's basically taking George Latimer's code and writing Larchmont in everywhere. But, it's just I was so surprised at his excitement level. I really thought he was going to be like, roll his eyes back in his head. He was so excited. And he has 3 friends who are really excited to do it. And the kids are really interested in this. Like, they're really scared. Like, they should be,
Well, why couldn't we invite them to come to a town council meeting if we decide to present it, right?
I think that's really powerful. I really do. And I think it's got to be not from the adult neighbors, but in the schools and with the young people who are going to be the ones that are influencing their families and saying and fighting with them at the dinner table for the weeks that it takes, or explaining.
Well,
stuff.
We can reach out to Joe Liberty. I can certainly let him know. I'm in touch with him.
Yeah, he's fantastic, and I think he's doing his bit. But it should be a presentation, a Zoom in every single class that's done by a kid. That's a presentation about one of the topics. That's what we were sort of proposing, and so that every science class, there's a presentation of a graduate who did an internship and is talking about blowers or healthy yards or any of these topics or rain catchers or but like from children, from other teenagers who believe strongly about it, to get that message out. And what you're talking about is so global and so large and such a big movement that's sort of essential. It's a must. It should be a chapter in their textbooks,
Well, we're going to go for it.
I'd like to jump in here. I'd like to
Mark.
refresh June's memory. About a year ago, we brought up the topic of flooding to this collaborative. And because of other more pressing items, nothing really, to my knowledge, in June, you can jump in, or anyone else, has happened. When you talk about climate and you talk about long-term and you talk about action and mitigation or any of these things, to my knowledge, and I have a stream in my neighborhood, and I visited Kevin's neighborhood, asked him several questions about the brook, which I was introduced to, and we also discussed the 2007 flooding. That it really takes enforcement as to who is responsible for dredging, for widening, for deepening, for whether it's sandbags or preventative action. The thing that's of interest to me is if I were to ask Sue or Nancy, can you list all the places that have potential flooding, either due to sea level rise or extreme flooding from extreme floods? They might tell me, go see the FEMA map. I don't know what their response will be. But that response is an old response because the streams have not been dredged. They have not been cared for in many areas of this town. So I think that is something that, Beth, if the money is available, just like the Corps of Engineers came into the village of Mamaroneck after the 2007 flooding, that was an unusual case in that it was an ice crust with a heavy rain on top, which is different than, let's say, the flooding that went on today in many places in Jersey and upstate New York from very heavy rain runoff. So one of the other things that the town could consider is when they do parking lots is not to make it all asphalt so that everything doesn't run off. So that you've got to plan ahead and start with baby steps. And when developers come in, I'm watching developers and they're putting their storm drains and their dry wells on the highest part of the property, not the lowest, the highest. So you laugh, but it gets inspected and it passes because there's no legislation within the town that says it has to be at the lowest point or anything else. It has to be somewhere. I don't know the exact logistics. So I think that there are things that can be done that will have action where people can say, yes, if this is done, my street may not flood again, or my street won't flood as bad, as opposed to, yeah, there's a problem that's 50 years down the road. It's only going to take another.
Yeah, it's right here, right now.
Yeah. I mean, Mark, my community was supposed to have gotten the Army Corps of Engineers back in and to do another dredging and riverbed widening of both the Mamaroneck and Sheldrake rivers, because they know it's a problem at the end of the day. And there was supposed to be congressionally appropriated funding that was going to go pay for that project, and it got kiboshed. So that basically is now another, fight that has to be happened. And hopefully we get that funding reinstated so we can get that project done and be a priority again.
The one thing I just want to mention is that if you think about a climate emergency declaration or resolution, think about it in procedural terms, not substantive terms. In other words, we're creating an infrastructure, okay? And that what the advisory committee does is it comes up with the substantive recommendations. But what I'm talking about with the climate emergency is let's build the infrastructure, let's build the policy or the lens through which our elected officials have to operate. And then as an advisory committee, we look at whether you need to dredge, whether you need adaptation, whatever the particular projects are. That's the substantive aspect of this, but it comes later. It comes after coming up with the procedural structure of how our elected officials should proceed, and that I believe that it could change the function potentially, or enhance the function, I should say, of the Sustainability Collaborative if we were acted as advisors.
Yeah, now the loading order that you speak of, Beth, that's exactly correct. That's exactly correct.
Okay, so.
Thank you so much, Mitchell.
Thank
really
you, Beth.
appreciate it.
And actually stick around because we're moving into the trees, as it were, and we're going to actually continue a variation of this conversation. So Arlene, Kevin, Mark, I actually don't see, I think Jake had a conflict today, and I don't see Rob either. But Arlene, could you start off and give us an update of where the tree team is at this point?
Yeah, so right now what we're doing is we're looking at the tree code, going line by line, redlining it, and trying to make the changes. So Jake has done a lot of this. As he pointed out, staying up till 4 a.m, but then he couldn't tonight. So no one should. And Rob was doing that. And then Mark and I, last week, we sat down and we went line by line, and we did the whole first part of it with the introduction, and the reason for why we need to change this tree code. So that part, we did that. And we got up to, what would you say, Mark? It's like a third of the way down?
It's one section or chapter of the code.
Yeah. Well, it was more than one section, though.
Yes, but it's one grouping. It's like the introduction, right. What they used to call exemptions, etc. I don't have the exact wording.
Right. So we're letting,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say they've done a lot of work on it, and it's almost like the more you do, the more questions you have, because some things are fairly straightforward. Other parts, you think about it, and then somebody else comes up. Well, there's just so many. Well, what ifs? So what about this? And so that kind of slows you down. It's a complicated process, and and we want to get it right. We don't want it being looked at and say, oh, we can't do this, or there's too many problems here. We want to get it right. And I'm listening to the conversation with Beth, and I forgot who else mentioned about
Eliza.
Who was talking about enforcement before? Beth was, and somebody else
was.
Mark.
That's Mark. A big, well, Mark, I know. But enforcement is a big issue, because there are a lot of things on the books, but they're not enforced. And, so that's another whole piece of this. And that's part of that tree code. What do you do about that? So now we're looking into, should we have a tree committee that kind of, as an adjunct to, to our environmental planner? When do we call in the arborist? How much control does, the planner have as opposed to the arborist? Who makes some of these decisions? And then what happens when it's just flaunted and, trees are getting either cut down, or after the fact they're getting cut down, or they're getting damaged during construction because some of the procedures are not being followed. So all of these things, well, what do we do about that? How do we decide on some of the penalties? How much money? Because we don't want it to just be a little slap on the wrist. Otherwise, it's just the cost of doing business, and it doesn't mean anything. Take down 10 trees and we'll plant 10 saplings is just not going to cut it. And here, what Beth is talking about, trees are really a front line. And, the large trees soak up a lot of water, and we really need that. And
radiation and heat. the number one thing a tree soaks up is sunlight, right? And so it helps with heat. As soon as you drive into Westchester from New York City, the heat drops, 5 degrees.
Yeah.
We need it for so many environment. I mean, for global warming, number one.
Right. Well, I'm just talking about the immediate emergency.
Flooding.
Yes, because it certainly, carbon is built into the trees. They just soak it up. That's how photosynthesis happens, and it's maintained. It's kept in the roots and in the tree itself. So all of this, and I think it was Michelle, were you the one that asked how do we find out how much a tree is worth? So we can look up on iTree and get a rough estimate, because a sapling is not a lot, but it eventually becomes something that really can be very valuable to us. So we're also looking at the value of the older trees, with a large diameter versus some of the smaller ones. And so it's complicated. And Mitch, I thought you were going to pass along the beginning that I sent you.
Oh.
It was going to the collab.
So I did get that, thank you, and decided that we needed to meet together a little bit with the tree team. So
okay.
I think, Arlene, you were copied. Jake and I went back and forth a bit today. He believes that he and Rob can get a lot of their piece, which is kind of the back half of the code, drafted. So informally, what we're trying to do, because the town board actually asked us to do this and we want to follow through, is we're aiming to get the draft to the town board by the end of June. We've targeted Friday, the 25th of June, if we can make it. We'll see how close we can get to that. And in the next couple of weeks, I think the collaborative is going to get 2 opportunities to take a look at this and to provide comments. We've done this in the past with other things like the tree white paper or the that other tree that actually got built at Bonnie Briar. It was the same sort of thing. We asked the collaborative for a rapid response on certain things, and everybody really chimed in quickly, which was great. And Arlene, I think everybody agrees that we want to get it right, but part of getting it right, frankly, is to get the conversation going and getting something on paper that is serious, which is exactly what the tree team's doing, and is comprehensive, which is exactly what you're doing, is great. And we can leave to the summer, I believe, a couple of things that are follow-ups, but will inevitably be questions from the board. As we've all talked about in the last month, things like, well, what's exactly on our tree list? And are there any invasives on the tree list? And are there penalties for people who ignore the tree list and plant invasives? As Arlene was just mentioning, what's a tree worth? The penalties for tearing down a tree are meaningless at the moment, but whether it's in terms of replacement value from a nursery, that probably doesn't get to the point. Maybe the point is things that Frank or Mark or the other Mark know about, which is what's the GHG what are the GHGs that a tree can take out of the air every year? And what's the value of that depending on the price of carbon? So it's things like that. Those are the kinds of conversations that we're going to need, backup material that we're going to need, but I don't know that we need those before the end of August. And a third one is more understandable, transparent, and helpful guidelines with where to plant what kinds of trees, not necessarily on private property, but on that grass strip between the sidewalk and the curb, and also on the first 5 to 10 feet of someone's lawn, which, as June was pointing out at the outset, that actually comes under the town's purview, especially in times of emergency. And so we want to be, I think getting those guidelines out, which I think would also be fairly easy to prepare, will give the town board some really interesting things, but also easy to understand things to engage us with, once we get to September. But that's what I'm thinking. What do you think?
Yeah, well, Mitch, I think I sent you, right? I sent you what our recommendation coming from the Sustainability Collab is about planting invasive species. I mean, part of the problem is that you're deviating from their own list of trees, and that's a big problem. So, if the town is going to plant these, then, how are you going to tell the residents not to do that? So they're, on the list of trees planted that have already gone in, there are invasive species. We think that because attached to that was also the county's, I think it's county law, that they do not plant non-native trees.
I think that was a proposal.
No,
Is a law. I mean, because
that's
that's
a
what.
law.
Yeah, it's a lot. Well, that's what Lisa wanted me to report on this from the LEC, which is that she spoke to Carol yesterday, and they're making revisions on the resolution around not planting invasives in Larchmont. And that's what Clive is working on, my son. He's helping do that. It's an internship around that, the invasives in the trees. And then she's going to attend the Thursday's Parks and Trees Committee, where Carol will propose a resolution to her committee. And as a joint, and they're hoping that they'll show the resolution to Lorraine and they'll put it in front of the board. So it's moving very quickly, actually, which is kind of exciting. But I think it goes back to what you're saying about reinforcement, because if it's already a law and it's just being ignored, like making another law that's ignored, well, that sounds really effective, I mean,
well, that's county property.
Okay.
County
this
property.
would be for Larchmont, and I think if Lorraine's, spearheading it and behind it, then it's going to happen.
Right.
If they're saying that's not going to be in the budget, invasives will not be on our budget for planting. So that's something they're doing, which is exciting.
The tree list for the town is okay. There were 2 questionable trees there. And we can just attach the list from Audubon. June passed that along too, and we've gone over some other tree lists that give you a whole collection of, trees that are suitable for the Northeast in this area.
And is that also looking at shrubs or you're just talking about trees?
We're just talking about the trees.
Not honeysuckle and
No.
Yeah.
We're just looking at just the trees that are, to be planted.
Right.
What do we do with something that's already in? I mean, I've got Norway maple, we're not going to cut them all down.
Excuse me, I just wanted a point of clarification.
Yeah.
When I heard you talking about this at the LEC meeting, will it'll be a commitment to honor this, because we do, is that correct? Because
yes,
we do have tree lists, as Arlene mentioned, and we have a very recent tree list.
It'll be an ordinance.
Conway.
It'll be a law.
Yeah. But so we have the lists. We know what the natives are. We do have a lot, Arlene. But the thing is, we don't have compliance or
law,
the coalition or the commitment or the law. So I thought this was sounded wonderful what Clive was working on it, and that's why I sent you a little note that I thought maybe you might want to also have a look at it.
Yeah, absolutely, and I will pass along what we wrote up, because when I started doing that, we as the Sustainability Collab are an advisory group. So as an advisory group, we're kind of advising, don't plant invasives, and stick with your own tree list. Yeah, so that's part of the problem. I mean, the problem is not even the non-natives. The problem is that there's invasives being planted, and that's kind of, that's really a no-no. But
who monitors this for the village of Larchmont? I mean, you have Liz Atkinson, who's
For the,
who's supposed to be,
that's for us. That's
that's
not,
for us, but who does this in the village of Larchmont? Who's in charge?
I don't know.
Who would patrol what's going in and what's being done?
Do you want to do that,
So-
Michelle?
So one,
I'm getting
Um,
ready. Don't joke with me. So, I think my part of my feeling is that people know that they can just do whatever they want, and that there is no, they can just do whatever they want. And
Well,
I
there's
think
no
it goes
oversight.
back
Like that's
even
the
to,
concern. What's the point in an ordinance if there's nobody overseeing it?
well, but it goes back to moving into Larchmont, and it goes back to people who are purchasing property in Larchmont and Mamaroneck, in the town, who just feel that they can just go and do whatever they like. I mean, we do have architects who file drawings for intention. And we're in a situation where there are drawings that are filed in the house next to us, then they just went and cut them all down. So the drawings that are approved by the town, the stormwater systems are designed around what, the new construction, and they just go and cut down the trees. So we're having, there's so many pieces of this that it's hard to get your hands around it. I mean, we have pretty rigid requirements in the town about water runoff from new construction. That's supposed to be monitored by the building department, and I think, is Liz part of that? Only
No,
if there's
she's not.
no,
only if there's some sort of planning, right?
No, actually, it appears that the Liz's position reports in some way, or the building inspector has oversight over her activities.
So I guess my bottom line question is, there's so many pieces and the pieces keep growing. Is there a way, Mitch, to take the priorities that are the most important to us and to deal with those, and to, at the very least, have a moratorium on the tree issues until all of it's done, but that we really make a point to tackle the piece of cutting down trees? Just say that's our most important point. And it just can't happen right now.
So Michelle, I wish that were the case, but you've lived here longer than me, and I think, and dealt with the government much longer than I have. I think what the tree team is trying to do is the right approach, to be as comprehensive as they can in the time we have, get it all out in front of the board, and then.
But if the intention of the board is in fact to do something about it, then maybe something can happen before the summer, and many more situations like the one I have happen. I suspect that this requirement of being under 20,000 square feet, you can go and do whatever you want, was an ordinance that was passed by the town because of some situations that were happening when that happened. But what it's morphed into, right? I'm not sure that the town, this has been going on for what, 2 years? Since the trees, clear cutting the trees on the properties has happened, at least 18 months, right?
Much longer.
Much longer.
Okay, so where's the moratorium to put a hold on the most important piece, which is you can't take them down? And certainly if you file that you're not going to take them down, then you don't take them down. I've been on a tirade all week, but I do think that there's nobody watching the shop. If someone from our home didn't walk into the building department and say, you can't do this. If I hadn't written to Liz, I mean, we were 2 adults in our home dealing with the building department, right? I'm not sure they've even been there yet. So this is a week already. And I think that, I think that there are issues that this brings up. It's, I'm heartsick that I'm the one that had to live through this, but I mean, that's life. And, but I do think from my perspective, some pieces of this are so huge, they are never going to be all right.
So Michelle brings up something that's somewhat separate from the tree code and is important to talk about here. We've had this kinds of conversation before, not on this subject, which is a moratorium. And I think most people who've been around town for a few years remember that probably 4 or 5 years ago, the town placed what I believe was either a 3 or 6 month moratorium on tear downs. And the town, because the town recognized that the existing laws were not serving the purposes that the people and the residents of the town of Mamaroneck needed to be served, the town board was able to pass the moratorium because it was for a limited time. It was for a clearly defined class of type of action. And the town wrote into the legislation the intention to revise and amend within that specific period of time, which the town then did, the legislation that was not serving the best interests of the people of the town. So, Michelle, are you asking the collaborative to advocate for something similar for a limited time ban on all tree removals in the town of Mamaroneck?
I would say definitely of trees over 20 inches in diameter. I think that
what do people
think that we've had enough.
I think that would be fantastic.
I think we've had enough clear cutting of properties by people who don't even live here. I think that those trees help our community in terms of soaking up water, soaking up carbon, providing shade, providing a community that is the way that we chose where we wanted to live, and that those trees cannot be replaced inside of 50 years.
No.
And, I actually did a little bit of research to see if I could get a 50-year-old magnolia tree, if I could have one purchased to be installed on that site where they're just, beating the shit out of the one that's there. And you can't even buy them, right? Maybe you can in Florida, but you can't up here. But I think that if we want to protect the nature of our community, I think we better figure it out.
So what do other people think about this? Mark or Arlene or Kevin?
I'm thinking about what do you do with dead trees or trees that are diseased. I'm facing that now.
Well, an arborist comes and confirms that the tree is actually very sick, like not a contractor who's clearing for construction.
Okay, that doesn't have to happen under the current code. I'll say that this idea is not new. It was brought up by Jake and Robert to put in a moratorium. I think that there are many examples. The example that you gave, Michelle, which is off topic, of a house being a tear down. There was a recent permit again for an extension to a house, and the house was torn down and they're in violation. And I don't know what the slap was, but it's a slap. The developer is still developing the house, but, continuing. And the plan of the house versus the plans that were on, approved by the board are totally different, and they were reissued. But I don't know, and I don't, it's after the fact. To put in a moratorium, really what we're asking the board to do is basically say that 20,000 square foot requirement in the first section of the code, which we've already revised as a draft to you, Mitch, is basically deleted, and that all town properties on the private sector as well as the public have to go through the permitting procedure. So it's not a moratorium, it's changing the code immediately to get rid of that 20,000. That may be a longer step, because there are lots of permits for construction going on probably in the town. I see them popping up all over. So a moratorium doesn't answer the question of someone who already is started because they're exempt. And to get the word out to everyone, especially now the landscapers who are looking for more money, not the arborists, not the tree companies. It's now being done by landscapers who are taking down full-size trees because it's very lucrative to them compared to cutting grass. They cut down one tree, it's like working on that property for the whole year in terms of a charge. So,
I would be in favor of a moratorium for but maybe 10 or 12 inches. I wouldn't go for such an old tree. But I think until we get our act together, that makes some sense. And I agree with Mark, immediately make all properties, subject to permit review.
I need to point out that I've got a lot of trees in my backyard, some of them close to neighboring backyards. And one of my neighbors a short time ago pointed out that there was one tree that he was very concerned would fall down on his roof. And I thought he had a good point. We had that tree taken down. So I think we need to be careful.
Well, there's you raised 2 points, George, before. A dead tree doesn't need an arborist to decide that a deciduous tree is totally dead. There are no leaves on the tree in the summer, it's dead. The question becomes one of a diseased tree. And Robert, Jake, myself, and Arlene, we're talking about when does a tree become diseased that the tree gets cut versus it gets pruned or it gets treated in some way for whatever the problem is. So if you had a 6-foot tree that has one dead limb, you don't have to cut the whole tree down because one limb is dead, you prune it. That's what an arborist would say. But if it's a disease, and let's say it's the ash borer or something, the ash borer can be treated. You can spray it, you can tar it. It depends what it is, and it needs a professional opinion. And we've raised the issue. We're not sure whether or not our environmental planner has the training to decide if a tree is diseased or it should be cut down because it's a hazard. And it's very easy to say when a developer comes in, oh, gee, all the trees are diseased, they all have to go. And who's agreeing with that? The environmental planner. So it's not an arborist, and that's why we've been talking as a group to have the arborist for the town or whatever as a second, as the prime opinion to determine disease, so that we don't just push the button. Jake, go ahead.
No, I think that we're not, the major issue, if we have to pick one, is if someone buys a house and clear cuts, takes down the house and has a whole new property. And that has to have a moratorium. The odd tree on someone's yard that's leaning or is dangerous, fine, of course. No one's going to really push that hard against it because it's just a one-off. but it's not the one-offs that we're worried about. We're worried about the, 20 trees get cut down because someone wants to, come from the city and make a new life and start fresh. That's the main issue.
But is that a
Let me
moratorium?
just interject here for a second, because I'm hearing a lot of different opinions going back and forth here. And I'm sorry that my screen's not on this evening. First, let me just go back here to what Beth was talking about in terms of, the emergency climate. And I think that, Mitch, as we've discussed in the past and going forward in this year, that I think the collaborative perhaps loses sight of the importance that the town puts on, the town board puts on the environment, in all the local codes that we've been passing, we've been looking at recently, and also as well as the collaborative, as well as the comprehensive plan. So what I'm saying is that, in just going back to what Beth was talking about from the onset of the meeting, that the sustainability needs to put together a draft and present it perhaps in September or October, knowing that we're in June now. We have one meeting left in June. We meet once in July, once in August, and then we resume our bi-monthly meetings in September. So I think that, Mitch, going forward, what you need to do is the collaborative you might have a focus group work on presenting or putting together a draft to present, but at the same time, coming before the town board, perhaps on the August 17th meeting or the July 21st meeting, as an outlier as to what you're working on, right? Now, this is important because we want to have, yes, I'm the liaison, and yes, I can speak to the town board, but it is of the utmost importance, and it goes further when there are several members from the collaborative speaking to the town board. In terms of moratoriums, Mitch, you are correct. There was many years ago, I guess, a moratorium was passed. But the town board, just last month, we passed a moratorium on tear downs. So there is a moratorium which was passed, and we passed this moratorium under a very quick process because we did not even hold a public hearing, of which we've gotten a lot of pushback for. There are a lot of residents in our town who would like to sell to developers. Because, and I can see both sides of the equation. They've lived in the town for the last 30 or 40 years. Their home investment is their major investment. And they feel now that they're not being able to capitalize on their investment. But with that said, there is a moratorium on tear downs in the town of Mamaroneck. But going forward, if you were to place a moratorium on the cutting of trees, 10 inches, 20 inches, 20,000 square foot lot or less, that there would be, I'll tell you right now, there would be a public hearing. And it would take several drafts probably and a review. A moratorium is usually not something which is within one board meeting or two board meetings that we can pass. And something as heightened as a moratorium, even though the town's in favor of, perhaps might be in favor of a moratorium, we would have to have a public hearing. The oversight right now is by the building engineer, and yes, Liz does answer to the building engineer. So there is some oversight, and I think we have to be careful of when we're talking about trees which might be diseased or not diseased, that, I agree, that is a professional, you need a professional opinion. We had a tree in my property that was a 40 diameter tree, and which we did not know that the tree was diseased until someone came out and inspected it and told us, yes, it's diseased. And you know what? There was a 3-foot diameter space inside the tree that was totally hollow. So I say that because you have to be careful, I think, in regards to who's the expert, who isn't the expert, who can sign off on that a tree needs to be cut down. So there are a lot of variables here. The town is aware of the tree cutting. The town supervisor is certainly aware of, and the town board certainly is. This is something which has been on our topic of conversation now for 6 to 9 months, if not longer. So we are looking at it. We continue to look at it. We're waiting for the sustainability to present their draft. Arlene has spoken to us 2 months ago, so we're waiting for the sustainability to come back. And at the same time, we have the comprehensive plan, which is underway right now, looking at these aspects, looking at the environment, looking at what the town of Mamaroneck is going to look like 5 to 10 years from now. So we're working on this on a lot of different fronts. And I just want everyone to be cognizant of that.
So Jeff, is the...
hold on a second, Michelle. Jeffrey, thank you for that. That was terrific. I think we'd like to take up your offer to come and report to the board in the July session. What was the date of that session?
Mitch, that is July 21st.
21st.
The town, as you know, and Sue knows, we normally meet only once a month for the months of July and August. So we have a June 16th meeting. Our meeting in July is on the 21st. And then the next meeting in August, excuse me, is August 17th.
I'm happy to send a note to you and Sue tomorrow with Nancy as well. But we'd like to book some time it'll be at the work session on the 21st.
It'd be at the work session on the 21st. Yeah, so I would send it to, certainly send it to Nancy, Sue, CC myself, and we can put it on the agenda for the 21st.
Great, and I pledge that we will have, we'll be working on something, we're obviously working on something quite comprehensive, but we'll have a good report for you on the 21st.
Terrific.
I'm sorry, Michelle, please.
Are the trees and the tree policies part of the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, yes, we're looking at, and again, this comes from Michelle, this comes from stakeholders, shareholders. So the topography, the landscape of the town, yes, and specifically the trees and yes. So we're looking at everything in totality, but yes, the tree cutting also, knowing that, you know, we're looking at revising the law, the legislation.
So the work that the collaborative is doing on the tree plan is something that gets rolled into the comprehensive plan, or it's separate?
You know, that's a good question. I would say now that with review and with the sustainability, you know, input and working with stakeholders, that it's something that could be rolled into, yes, the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for your comments on the moratorium, because it's possible the moratorium is not the right venue for this. And Mitch, maybe this is something that, you know, the pieces of what Arlene and team are working on are things that could be affect the tree code as we have it now. Comprehensive plan doesn't start for another couple of years, right?
No, the comprehensive plan is underway right now. We're going to sign off on the comprehensive plan in 2022. No, the comprehensive plan, the whole study, the drafting of it, you know, that's the timeline for that is 10 to 12 months, and we are, you know, 3 months, almost 4 months into the comprehensive plan. So no, this is not something which is just going to be a dust collector and put on the shelf, you know, 3 years from now. No, this is going to be a policy document moving forward, of which we can refer to and utilize and review starting, you know, next year, second quarter, the latest. So no, this is something which is real time, right now. But to go back to the moratorium, there is a moratorium which the town board passed on tear downs. So if you're not allowing tear downs, the developer cannot come in and cut trees because for new construction, because we have a moratorium on tear downs.
But if they don't tear it down, they can still go in and cut down the trees that are there in order to do whatever.
Property owner, yes, yes. As we know, the ordinance, right, under 20,000 square feet, the owner can elect to cut down trees. And as we know, after every major storm, or I would say power outage, that there's, and I'll be honest, there's probably a knee-jerk reaction. We have I have some very mature trees on my property that and there have been times where everyone is sleeping on the lower level because I have on my neighbor's property, she has a couple of trees which have been identified as, shall we say, not healthy. So there was a concern, but I say that only because after every major storm, trees are taken down by residents who feel they present a hazard, to themselves or maybe even to their neighbors.
Can I throw one little teeny thing out there that I just think is a good thing for people to know about dead trees? My sister's a landscape architect, and she reminded me the other day, everyone should have one dead tree on their property for woodpeckers and for termites, and that they live there and they will go to your house and they will be pecking on your house. And if you have one dead tree, obviously not one that's positioned about to fall down on your house, but one that's sort of somewhere that it works. And if you look on your property at that dead tree, there will be a woodpecker there all the time, and it will be where termites will migrate versus, it's just something to in the back of your head.
Well, I mean, you can take a grain of salt. So I've had woodpeckers pecking at my house at 7 o'clock in the morning. If I had to come back and and I'm staring at the dead tree.
But they like the dead tree better.
Well, they also like my house too. I hear that tap, tap, tap. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, you can take that with a grain of salt. But listen,
I think it's true. Jeff.
Actually, I'd like to move on if we can. We have 3 other agenda items that we need to get to, if that's all right with folks.
A quick follow-up to Jeff. Jeff, what are the public hearings, public meetings going to be for the comprehensive plan where the public will be invited to talk?
Mark, I don't have that information in front of me, but it's on our website. It's on the town's website. Because as an involved resident, as yourself, you're certainly a stakeholder, shareholder. Yourself, George, everyone that's involved with the sustainability. So, please, frequent the website.
Okay.
And
I wasn't aware that it had started. That you had actually commenced. There was discussion about it, but I didn't know it started. So I'm not looking for it.
Yes, it started, and just I know someone was mentioning the town administrator. As of last week, we do have, not full-time yet, but we do have a new town administrator. And that is Meredith S. Robson, who is very experienced. She's coming from a municipality and has worked in several municipalities as a town administrator. And I do believe that her full-time status, or she'll be full-time, I want to say the middle of the beginning of September. So we do have someone that now that's going to be replacing, or will replace, Steve.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeff. So Jeffrey, so please stick around for the last couple of things. I know that we're going to move to minimize waste, and we have 2 things to talk about. You first, George, and then I think if Judy is still here somewhere, I'd like, oh, there you are, of course. Then Judy has something on a slightly related topic. So George, Repair Cafe?
Yeah, well, we haven't been doing anything until now. We've just I'm just starting to think about when and how and where. Last year, we did a lot of work last year. Actually, it got canceled the night before. So we were all ready to go. We had what I would consider a steering committee, although we didn't have that name. And it was myself, Wendy Giddings, and Scott Iceberg. Scott has disappeared as far as I'm concerned. I can't get to his email, and his phone is turned off. But we have 3 people right now for what could be considered a steering committee. Kevin Crow and Wendy is back, and I'm going to be looking for some more people. Especially, I got an email from, I think it was Ellen Silver recently, who said, in effect, please don't forget us in the villages. And I told her that they're on the loop now that we're here on this meeting, and I hadn't thought about it. People from the village are in the loop anyhow because I see them right now, but I'll stay in touch with Ellen, and I'll ask her if she wants to join the so-called, what I call the steering committee. I'm thinking in terms of having the cafe in the fall, possibly early October. And we were ready to go at the senior center last year, and I see no reason why we shouldn't do that again on the weekend, probably on a Saturday. And we've got a number of things that obviously have to be done, and I would be very happy to get together with this steering committee, as I call it, perhaps later this month, and divvy out responsibilities. That's essentially where we are now. But Mitch, you're on top of me, constantly reminding me about the cafe, and I didn't even want to think about it until a lot of people got their shots. But I think by October we'll all be set for that. And I've got all the information from the last time as far as the repairs are concerned. I would want to get back to everybody who was prepared to go last year. I think that's a good start. Now, some people, I'm sure, are no longer interested. Some people may be dead. Some people have probably moved away, but it's a good way to start.
Right. So
I want to say,
quick things.
I just want to jump in and say, I look forward to working with George on his team.
Great.
That's all.
One other thing I should mention, we're on Facebook under groups, Town of Mamaroneck Repair Cafe. I would ask everybody who can to get onto that and sign up as a member. It looks good. It's a good promotional activity. Sue Odierno last year was very good in doing a lot of promotion for this, and Sue and the town are putting material on the group, and that'll continue, no doubt.
George, just quickly, a couple things. So I think you hit on one of them, which is to get back to all of your repairers to, quickly to make sure that, you can get them organized. Please also separately contact Sue to coordinate dates. The fall can be a really busy time.
Yeah, well, virtually
everybody can, work that out well. And great idea, George. Please reach out to Ellen Silver from the Village of Mamaroneck, and then reach out to Lisa McDonald and Sasha Nar from the Village of Larchmont to see if each of them wants to propose somebody from their teams to be on the steering committee. I think that would be great.
I can also bring that to them. That's supposed to be why I'm like representing them today. So I can bring that, George, for you to them.
Okay.
So you want someone for the steering committee?
Right.
For
if you have my email address, do you have my email address? Well, it's veronicageorge@gmail.com. So let's stay in touch in that.
Okay. So just put in writing what you would like me to propose to them.
Okay, sure.
Lisa had said that they were interested in helping out with the Repair Cafe. When we did it last time, they were involved. Village of Larchmont and Village of Mamaroneck were always going to be involved. So if you
Okay, cool.
contact Lisa, she could probably tell you who within LEC.
Who they assigned to it.
And
Okay.
maybe her, I don't know, but she was interested.
And Mitch, just there's one thing that Lisa asked me to request of the collab. It's a quick thing to put on for another agenda item, but whenever you want me to say it, it's 4 seconds.
Okay, well, let's get through a couple of other
Yeah,
things first.
Of course.
All right, Judy, there you are.
Hello,
Go
everybody.
for it.
Okay, so I was contacted by an MHS alum. His name is Dan Zarderer. I don't know if anybody have kids that know him. Anyway, he is a teacher at one of the charter schools in the city, and he has decided that he is going to devote full-time, he's going to leave his job and devote full-time to build up this community fridge in the Mott Haven section of the Bronx. So he reached out to Karen Kaur. We all know Karen Kaur is out taking care of her mom in Malaysia. And Karen asked me to meet with him. So I had a Zoom call with him last Friday. He's looking at a couple of things, but the most immediate would be any outreach that he can get the word out that he needs volunteers. The process is they have the source of food. They go down to the Hunts Point Market. Somebody has volunteered a refrigerated truck that gets loaded up with food, and then volunteers go to that particular truck, fill up their cars, and then transport this to these community fridges. There are about 22 throughout the Bronx. And his currently exists in the Mott Haven section, and he's looking to build a volunteer network. So we were brainstorming about what the outreach could be. So the How Green Group was an obvious choice. The LEC would be another one. And again, it's just to kind of lay out what his group is doing and to see if they could help build this network of volunteers. The reason why I'm bringing up in this meeting is because I thought, since we have a table, a sustainability table at the farmers market, I didn't know what the protocol was. Could this be another thing that we present as people come by to say, if you're interested in volunteering, here's the website, here's how you sign up. And it really, it dovetails with our food waste recycling, because they are, the food that would be thrown away is now being put into these community refrigerators. So my question is, are we comfortable, and do we want to give him space at the table to solicit volunteers?
What do we think, team?
Why not? I think it's great. This is so excellent. I think it's great.
He said the two other things, eventually what he really would like to do is to install a community fridge in Lower Westchester. And, Karen and I mentor the OCRA. I think somebody else on a call for a prior topic was talking about that. There's a group of students who are trying to come up with a proposal for a project, and installing a community fridge in the Lower Westchester would probably be a fantastic thing for them to do. So he's looking primarily for volunteers, with the hopes that it kind of morphs into also you get enough interest and you have enough need that you actually can install a community fridge in Lower Westchester. And then obviously, since he's leaving his job as a teacher, he's going to also start looking for funding. But that's not his immediate need, is really to solicit volunteers for transport of this food.
Judy, does all this food come from commercial establishments such as supermarkets or restaurants? Do you know that yet?
Yes, currently not. Right now, they go to the Hunts Point produce market, and that's what is being used in this refrigerated truck. Somebody has. So to answer your question, no, it's not from supermarkets yet. But
Okay.
I spoke about that, and I said, that would be a fantastic project, down the road, especially if he's going to try to build these community fridges in Lower Westchester. That might be a perfect source for the food. So absolutely, it was something we talked about, but it currently doesn't. That's not the source right now.
Judy, has he contacted Fresh Direct in the Bronx? Because they have their own, food food pantry that they're supporting in outreach to various places. And if they haven't, I strongly suggest it. As far as your comment, and just to put in another thing, the Larchmont Oakwood Students for Food Scrap did launch their bicycle food scrap collection in the village of Larchmont on May 15th, and they're continuing. Myself and Lisa McDonald and Karen are the mentors. The 4 students are looking forward to expanding with next year's seniors. But to answer your question, there is also Volunteer New York. Are you aware of that organization? Okay. That would, if you advertise a need there, you display it across all municipalities of Westchester.
Good.
And I think that's a really good source of volunteers.
Okay.
And gets your message out.
Good. I'll definitely let him know.
I would say in terms of the table, I think there's room at the table. The tree giveaway is over. It's always good to have someone to be bringing people in for the other people to get interested. However, I think there's only 4 Saturdays left. July 3rd is the last. So just keep that in mind.
Good. Okay.
Judy, he's planning on coming to get volunteers to come to our table to get okay.
He grew up in Larchmont. He grew up on Avon Road. So if he or somebody from his organization would be there, and if not, if one of us was there and we had the handout, we would be able to solicit for him.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like that's a go, Judy.
Okay, great. Thank you. He'll be very happy, and I'm sure he'll be very grateful. Thank you.
Okay, Frank, are you still here? Yes, Frank and Nick, you're still here. Good. So
you want to take it away and I'll add to what you have to say?
Sure, why not?
Go for it.
All right, so yeah, Frank and I huddled on the discussion basically of doing, some form of an informative, presentation on the subject of energy and sustainability how-to, when we're going to start kicking off some of these kind of presentations at library in October. And so, I had an idea about how we could probably structure it in terms of some subtopics that could probably fall very nicely under this umbrella topic. I'm thinking about structuring it in a way where, first we could probably target to talking about how, homeowners in this case can basically make their homes more energy efficient, go through the basics of the principles of how, where maybe energy leaking can occur, and then how you can counteract that and help with basically improving, the building envelope, and then improving on the systems in this case, and go through talking about how you can do low to, other major cost type improvements to a home in this case, that's touching on kind of that one topic area. Then maybe moving over to commercial and then talking about how maybe those principles are a little different. And then also talking about how maybe we can make those buildings more energy efficient and how we can describe what kind of improvements can help with that. And then touching on then different resources that could be at, homeowners and commercial property owners' disposal to help with making those energy saving improvements a reality. So maybe touching on resources that are available through Sustainable Westchester, NYSERDA, the utilities, and then even potentially with the, the CPACE, initiative is going to get adopted by Mamaroneck. So all those different types of things, I think is something we'd love to be able to touch upon. But then as we were thinking about it in this case, and maybe this is where I'll pass it to you, Frank. So Frank definitely, was noting to me and made very clear that, you can go have the best intentions, set up a really great kind of, presentation, but then at the end of the day, what if you only get 5 people to come? Because then it's not necessarily topics that people are going to be attracted to per se. So, we want to be sure, I think more or less on the front end, that we're going to be coming up with topics that people are going to be attracted to want to come to us for. So sure, it's important they're lively, enjoyable, and informative, but it's got to be attractive as well. So Frank, why don't you touch a little bit on that as well?
I think you covered it, but it's just on that last point. I think Mitch and Sue, I guess we put it to you, but then to everybody, if there's a way that we could solicit, maybe it's a survey of something of on this topic, if there are things that residents are really interested in knowing about. Because I don't know whether it's maybe people think, well, I'm interested in energy efficiency, but I'm really interested in, the storm issues and how can I get emergency power. It would be nice to be able to get some direct community feedback. Not, I think our sustainability group tends to be a little insulated. So if there's some way to get that from the community, that'd be really helpful. So maybe I'll stop there and see if anybody has any ideas.
Frank, what about, I don't know how many folks hook in to watching LMC TV, but if we could get, public service announcements locally are a good idea, or using the school newspaper with a quick video that would go home to parents, soliciting ideas, using social media and that kind of thing. I mean, June is an expert on marketing, so I would defer to her. She'd have lots of ideas for how we could be reaching out to people to get their input.
But we definitely had June on our list of people to ask because seems to be the sage on all this stuff. But
I'm actually a little confused because I wonder, Mitch, is this the same as the Larchmont Mamaroneck Continuing Education project that we've confirmed with Martha?
Yes, this is
going
exactly
in a whole
the
other
same.
direction. We've already proposed content, and she agreed to it, and she requested a program based on what we proposed. So was that not
These
shared
guys
with
saw
our
all
energy
that.
experts?
so I must have missed that. Is that was
Yeah, I
that
didn't see it. Yeah.
circulated? Did you see that, Nick?
No, I can't say I did.
Yeah, we
And
talked
Nick has
about.
it, but we
Go
can
ahead, June.
resend it. We can resend it. This needs to be confirmed quite quickly, actually. This isn't a library project, although what you're describing sounds like it could be a great one. Karen and I started speaking with Martha Sundin, who's the executive director of the Larchmont Mamaroneck Continuing Education Program, a few months ago. And she asked us to come up with a series of sustainability oriented, essentially classes. I mean, there's no charge for it. This would be free to community members. And I wrote up 3 course descriptions, and she'd like to do energy as the first one. And she gave us a date for that in October. And all the other ones sort of cascade from this. In other words, this one has to really have great impact and be a crowd pleaser, because her ability to, or her decision to confirm the subsequent meetings or the subsequent classes is really depends on this. So we can talk offline about what that proposal looked at and what that proposal looked like and how we take your great ideas and weave them in. It's not a 75-minute session in terms of presentation. You know, the standard these days are people speak for 20 minutes, right? That became the TED Talk. They sort of set the bar on that, a couple of decades ago. So they're really thinking 30, 40 minutes plus Q&A plus an introduction. It might, at the end of the day, with discussion and a lively Q&A session, it might hit, 60 minutes or an hour and 15, but you don't have to present for an hour and 15 minutes. So we can talk about what Martha is expecting and what she thinks will be a hit with her crowd. And it's really great that she came to us, for this. And rather than go on, Mitch, I can leave it to you to send the proposal that we wrote up.
So actually, June, if you
send
could
it following
send it around again and then send it to Frank and Nick, and feel free to, the 3 of you, just to get together and pursue this in a timely fashion.
Yep. Yeah, the other thing is Mark Corral had just texted us or texted me and said he'd be very interested in participating with this too, which
that's great.
Mark is a really excellent presenter, and given that the facts that the stakes are very high now, I might
Yeah.
Mark jump right in and lead the show. But well, Nick,
so I just want to say, so I agree about Mark, and I think it's so terrific that he is throwing his hat in the ring with this as well. But just to say, just to be fair, everybody here is a subject matter expert in at least one, in multiple aspects of sustainability. But that doesn't necessarily mean everybody is comfortable and sort of trained and experienced as a speaker. So we can also just put down some basic, a few bullets about what to be mindful of to win over a crowd. And that should be easy for everybody here, but it's still worth doing. It's always good to have a criteria to say, oh, am I following this? Am I hitting this point? And that just, supports your success. Also, you have to realize that when people come, you guys, the experts, so they expect you to be able to say, here are the top 3 or 4 things you guys need to know about. They're not looking for a survey about this. And I think you guys no doubt know the top 3 or 4 things that you believe are important for our community to know about. They don't want anything highly technical. They want to know how to save money. That's basically what it is. They want to talk about grid rewards. They'll be interested in community solar. This is really the draw here is, how do you follow these simple steps and save money? We talked about it, and we'll go over the content outline. We'll need to define for them. A lot of people don't know about any of this. They don't know what renewable energy is and why it's relevant to them. So I think it'll be a great session, but it needs to be tied up soon because Martha needs sign off in the next few weeks. And she's going to start promoting it in August. So we'll get together. Yeah. Sounds like it'll be great.
That's good. Thank you.
Okay, then just the last thing for this evening, the high school's Okra team launched the Green Mamaroneck app last Thursday, June the 3rd. I'm sure most of you got one of the e-blasts. The town will be sending out a press release probably after Sue recovers from being the organizer extraordinaire of the party for our town administrator. What we do know is that the collaborative will be becoming the host of the app from here on, and I'm working with Michelle to develop a small content committee to work over the summer. We now have actually 2 different people interested, Sue in helping in some way with working on the content for the app. So I'll get back to you about that tomorrow. These would be internships. They're both high school students, and we would run that in the typical way the internships have run. And so the notion is to get us set up to start moving down the road to update the app about every 3 months. Apparently that's a good idea to keep it fresh and to keep driving people to new things on the app. And also to tune up the app in various places where the wordsmithing could be better, the picture selection might be improved, and sort through some of the icon questions as well. So that'll be happening, and stay tuned for that. Sue, we're still going to have our meeting on July the 13th.
Yeah, so the current plan is to have the July and the August meetings at the senior center, our old meeting place pre-COVID, the big dining room at the senior center. But now there's a deck in the back. And so if it is nice and we want to be outside, we can.
Okay, that's great. I think we'll all enjoy being together again.
Mitch, can I throw this one thing out so
Please.
Lisa and Sasha don't kill me? They wanted to ask if, speaking of the Okra app, if it could be called Green Larchmont Mamaroneck, not just Green Mamaroneck, as a thing to think about, because to reach a broader audience, and also because they've been in contact with Joe and they have suggested a bunch of revisions and they really want to apply all this stuff to Larchmont as well. So that's just food for thought, and I'm putting it out there.
So a couple things, Eliza.
Yes.
We'll take that under advisement, and
Okay, request.
I have to talk about that. I have to talk to Nancy about that. At the same time, if they have any suggestions, Joe is not the arbiter. So they should send those to Sue and me.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Okay. All right. Anything else this evening? Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you, Mitchell.
Thanks,
Mitch.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, bye.